In the year 1666, that old hack that invented gravity did what any good man who's alone on a Friday night does. He ordered a caloric nightmare of a burger on Uber Eats, and then put on his favorite Pink Floyd album while he scrolled through YouTube looking for a video to watch while he eats. As he sat there on top of his dragon's hoard worth of cash he got from ruining the lives of all the physics and math students for the rest of eternity, he was struck with another idea. Why stop with just the math students? You know who else deserves to have their education marred by the ideas of a guy who got hit in the head by an apple and came up with the whole concept of gravity just so people wouldn't make fun of him and say a skill issue for not dodging? Those art students with their big dumb bags they're always walking around campus with. But how would I go about doing such a thing, he wondered, until his eyes fell upon the cover of the album he was listening to, The Dark Side of the Moon. It was genius. All he had to do was break out the trusty old triangular prism all us guys keep on ourselves for situations like this, and hold it up to the window. The light of the police sirens that had been flashing outside his house for 3 days now refracted through the prism and revealed the key to having the objectively correct opinions as to why his art was fantastic and why other people's art were literally less than useless wastes of space. The color wheel, and with it, color theory. It's a truly moving story, I know, but there's a question we always have to ask ourselves when we're reflecting upon these stories of old. That being, how does this relate back to Luigi, class? You know, one of these days I really should get more students that aren't just blank self-inserts for the audience. Ah yes, color theory. The time all the art students decided to try out this math stuff they've heard so much about, slammed a bunch of paintbrushes together or whatever it is they have in those giant bags, realized that they've created color equations, and probably instantly received an entire lifetime's worth of Dr. Frankenstein brand regret in a fraction of a second. And I know that's how it happened, because I'm one of them. Look at this bag of supplies I had to buy that cost me over $200 for a color class I took last year. Please don't bully me. The paints in the bag are sentient and they will start screaming. But enough of that. You're not here to make fun of the guy with an art degree, as fun as that might be. You're here because you want a slice of that forbidden knowledge that can turn your opinion about a purely subjective piece of art into an objectively correct critique that will be parroted by the masses. That, or you're here because you saw your favorite character in a thumbnail and want to hear me talk about their design. Whichever one works, honestly. Point is, you want to learn about color theory, and I'm here to teach ya in the only language us creatures understand. Video game character designs. I've got a whole lineup of characters all the way from the super famous to my buddy Greg, who has colors. And don't worry even if you think you're somebody who thinks they somehow have negative art talent or knowledge. This is a video that's meant for anybody, whether they're an utter beginner or a legendary master. My employable level professional knowledge, mixed with my deranged sense of humor and a concerning amount of video game experience, will create a concoction of passable taste anyone can enjoy. Whether that enjoyment comes from the joy of learning a new skill or refreshing what you already know in a hopefully funny way, I'm sure it'll be worthy of at least eating your dinner too. So hey, settle in for class then, new student. I'm gonna tell you right now that you made the best decision of your life enrolling in my class. Sure, it is a bit weird that it's just, you know, the two of us in here right now, but I'll tell you, there are actually 2 other students enrolled in this class. I don't remember exactly why they're not here today. I think maybe they said something about, like, checking the traps they left at Wingstop to find and eat the elusive grease phasmid, I think it was. Let's just not worry about those idiots for today though. I'm sure you'll meet them another time. All you need to know is that I'm your partially licensed yet wholly wanted by law enforcement professor, Andrew Gallardi, and I'm here to teach you how color theory works through the silently verbose language of character design. God help us all. Now, there's a lot of questions to answer right at the start here, and I promise I'll get to discussing character design soon, but we need a background before we can focus on the main stage, both metaphorically and literally, because we need something to look at while I talk. So I guess just enjoy this B-roll time-lapse of me struggling to learn how to do digital painting for the first time, so I could make this dumb postcard idea based on an invincible Rathma I found while playing Monster Hunter Wilds. Because that's what you want to see, right? Anyway, I'm not sure what question is principal in your mind right now, but I know the one that's circling around my head like an obese hamster attempting to run on a wheel. That being, why the hell is a graphic designer the one who's going to be talking about character design? Sure, it makes sense they'd know something about color theory, but wouldn't it make more sense to talk about colored logos or something instead then? Well, you're right about one thing, I'm no character designer, but that's no reason to deter me from this topic. That being because this video isn't one where I'm rating their designs or anything. Rather, think of character design designs as merely the vehicle by which I am delivering my lunatic ramblings about color theory through. I'm sure I'll make comments about the designs as we go, it's unavoidable to a certain extent, but color theory is our first priority here. As for why I chose to use specifically character designs as a teaching device, it's because they can hold powerful yet easy to understand meanings upon analysis. Color theory is a universal language that character design speaks, and it's one that'll be easier for me to teach you how to speak with concrete examples you may already be familiar with. I could sit here and rattle off all the different color schemes and their common meanings in a vacuum, but that's something a boring, dry college professor would do. I'm trying to be the cool teacher and use actual real examples of color theory you're probably familiar with, and don't even know it. So basically, just because character designs are fun examples, it'll make it a lot easier for me to teach the subject. Plus, I'm no stranger to character design either. Instead, I'd say I'm more of an uncle who visits on its birthday with some nice gifts and drops by a couple other times a year. He's also that uncle that you never really realized it as a kid, but when you're an adult you realize he was hit pretty hard by the Great Recession in 2008 and was really struggling but still made an effort to get you nice gifts at his expense, and always weirdly smelled vaguely of watermelon for some inexplicable reason. That's how I'd summarize my relationship with character design anyway. I may not see it much, but I always make an effort to understand it when I do. I did also lose my job in 2008 at the ripe age of 4, and I've been living paycheck to paycheck ever since, but that's a topic for the next video. So hopefully that'll put to bed any questions you had about my ethos. I know it won't, but let a man dream, okay? If you really want to know more, I have an associate's degree in graphic design, and I'm currently working for my bachelor's. Most of the knowledge I'm drawing upon for this video comes from a frankly surreal feeling memories of a color class I took that happened once a week for like 4 hours in the morning, and they were some of the most stressful hours of my life, dude. It was the epitome of that one meme where the little girl looks all happy thinking about coloring, but then when she's actually trying coloring, she's just breaking down crying. Turns out though, as the frustration of trying to mix paints only for it to never quite look right as it slowly gets worse and your attempts to fix it become permanently engraved in your mind, so did all the knowledge of color theory from that class as well. If you ever want to learn something and have it stick for a long time in your head, just mix the experience with trauma. That'll make it stick nice and healthy. It's already been long enough though. I'm sure you've learned more about this sopping wet cat of a human being than you ever wanted to in your lifetime. We're here to talk about colors, damn it. So let's actually do that. Whoa, don't get ahead of yourself, bucko. It's not quite time for the character designs you actually want to hear about yet. That would be too interesting. Like I said, this is a video for people everywhere from those who know the ins and outs of color theory to those who have barely heard of it. So I need to establish a base level knowledge for you to work off of. I'm still teaching about color theory, just not quite the character designs yet. As I'm sure you remember from that incredible beginning, Isaac Newton created the first color wheel, and no artist has ever recovered since. In its simplest form, color theory is merely the study of colors and their behavior when paired with one another. If I were to sum it up as more of a pitch, however, I'd say that colors convey emotion, feeling. They're the subliminal messages that tell your brain how to feel. Each one has their own individual, commonly held interpretations that make sense on their own. It's when you start to mix these messages with one another in a way that complements an underlying meaning that it goes from a kindergartner with crayons to color theory. As for how the wheel itself is set up, there's actually 3 different sets of primary colors I'd like to highlight. There's the more traditional primaries, red, yellow, and blue, the digital primaries, red, green, and blue, then the printing primaries, cyan, magenta, and yellow. In each set, the primary colors are the 3 that can be combined in varying amounts to create all other colors. Red, yellow, blue is what you're going to see on a color wheel, with them all being an equally spaced triad used in painting and other traditional art. RGB is what you're going to see in any digital context, as those are the 3 colors that are used to make up every pixel of the screen you're using to watch this. If you've ever looked super close at a screen and seen a bunch of red, green, and blue squares making up the picture, that's how they're combined. Each color has a value ranging from 0 to 255. When they're all at 255, it becomes white, and when they're all at 0, it becomes black. CMYK are the primary colors you'll be familiar with if you've ever had the displeasure of needing to buy printer ink. If you notice the K in CMYK and are wondering what that's for, first off, good job for noticing that, and like any good teacher, I will reward such good student behavior by taking a piece of candy from the jar on the teacher's desk and throwing it at you and just kinda hoping that you catch it. Even if the 5-year-old Laffy Taffy I just threw at you and hit you square in the forehead, I'm just gonna move on as the vultures that are the other students devour your corpse and say that the K stands for key color. The name implies it's a color that changes, but I've never seen it as anything other than black, so I'm not sure what big printer was thinking with that one, gotta be honest. Those are the primaries for each one, but further down there are the secondaries that you get by combining primaries, and even further down there are the tertiaries that you get by combining secondaries. Secondaries have unique names, but tertiaries do not, and are just referred to as the 2 colors that make it up. Wow, how embarrassing, tertiary colors. Everybody point and laugh at them. Now that you have a flawless and complete understanding of the color wheel, I'm gonna inject a couple fancy vocab words into your skull so you don't get confused about all the jargon I'm gonna start spewing out. Because you're not confused already, right? Of course you're not. You're my star student. Just don't interrupt me again, lest the Chroma Wraith devour devour the color from your soul like what happened to Timmy last semester, okay? Good. Now who wants to learn about the difference between tints, shades, and tones? Well, thankfully, they're quite simple. A tint is a color that white has been added to make it brighter, and a shade is a color black has been added to make it darker. The forgotten middle child of this trio then is a tone, which is any color that gray has been added to in order to make it whatever the hell else it needs to be. Then there's hue, saturation, and value, otherwise known as the HSV color system. You keep it up with me here? Of course you are, why would I even bother asking? Hue is kinda just a synonym for color in general, but I usually use it when referring to pure color specifically. At least I think that's what it is. Saturation is then how saturated it is. Honestly, not sure how else to explain this. I guess you could just think of it as how diluted the color is, but I'm sure you get it just by looking at it. Then there's value, which I would say is the most important aspect when it comes to any color-related decisions, but that's a topic for another lecture. It's the measure of how light or dark a color is, the brightness, if that helps you. A low value means a dark color, and a high value means a light color. I might expand more on why I think values are super important when it comes to color, but we'll see if we have enough time in class today. Either way, I'll just leave the vocab definitions at that for now. Good job, we got through all the basic entry-level information, and nobody even ended up screaming. A new record for this class, one that will be rewarded with me finally getting to the character designs. The way we're going to be doing this is by going through 6 different categories of character designs that I've prepared. These categories correspond to the 6 major color schemes I'll be teaching, those being monochromatic, analogous, complementary, split complementary, triad, and tetrad. These color schemes make up the core goal of color theory, with them being the guidelines to create harmonious color schemes that will make the peasantry respect both your choice of red-violet in your art, as well as your ultra surf murdering kill sword. Mostly your sword, but those color choices are definitely a part of it. So the first color scheme I'll be branding onto your brain is monochromatic. Do you get it yet? Okay, so monochromatic isn't exactly the flashiest color scheme to start with, but it's important to start with the simplest and work your way upwards, okay? Although, I'll be upfront with you and say that I had a lot of trouble coming up with a good list of characters for this category, so get those expectations real nice and low for me, okay, sweetheart? Oh wait, no, I wasn't talking to you, dear viewer. I was literally referring to the character named Sweetheart, who just so happens to be our first example. I'm sure you couldn't tell, but I really like Omori, so naturally I picked her as our introduction to the monochromatic color scheme. Like I said, I also didn't have many options I could find, if I'm being totally honest. We'll get to more well-known characters later, just let me have this at the start here, okay? So I'm sure I don't need to explain what monochromatic means, but I've explained dumber things on here, so here I go. With the prefix mono meaning one and the root chroma meaning color, we can put together that this color scheme is a whole bunch of fuck shit, or at least that's what it probably seems like at a first impression. Can you really call it a color scheme if it only uses one color? And how is Sweetheart supposed to be monochromatic in the first place? You can clearly see plenty of different pinks and whites contrasting your darker skin tone. This makes no sense. Well, first off, let me say that this is your second warning for interrupting the teacher while he's teaching. If you do it again, you will be sent into chromatic psychosis in the timeout corner, so watch your damn mouth. And secondly, all those questions are partially why I chose Miss Sweetheart here as our first example. She shows how you can kinda cheat just a little bit when classifying these color schemes. To answer the first question, monochromatic absolutely still qualifies as a color scheme because it's not literally just a single color and nothing else. Monochromatic is defined as using any tint, tone, or shade of just one color. So as we can see with Sweetheart, they may be different, but they all fit under the same umbrella of pink. A saturated reddish pink makes up the main body of the dress, with a light pink trim matching her hair and mace. It's all the same hue, just with varying amounts of value and saturation. What about the white though? That's clearly not pink. Well, to that I say, what a dumb student you are. How dare you try to learn something not perfectly understand it all at once? If you just take out those big dumb eyes that are failing you and plug in some new ones, you'll see that that's definitely fucking pink, I'll tell you that much. Going back to the color wheel, I'm sure you've noticed that there's no black and white listed on here. So how do they fit into color schemes? Black and white's answer to that is simply yes. That's it, because what else needs to be said about them? They're the two colors that go with literally everything and appear everywhere. For instance, just think of your father's black suit covering his wrist as he was signing the white divorce paper. It's universal. When it comes to putting them in color schemes though, you gotta realize that pure black or white is almost never used. It's usually a very dark shade or a super bright tint of the key color to give it more unity and make it look more natural. You can see that with the white on Sweetheart's dress, with it rather being a very light pink tint. We're also generally just considering the colors of what the character is wearing, because I don't think magically changing a character's skin tone to be green just to match some kind of color scheme makes very much sense if you ask me. That's pretty much it though in terms of how she's monochromatic at a base level. It's now that we can look a little bit more into the why. Good good character design usually isn't just going to use colors that the designer thought looked cool and nothing else. Colors have meaning. Those meanings are what's combined through color schemes to convey an overall message. The message here being that Sweetheart is an absolute bitch. Pink as a color is a tint of red, and red probably has the most apparent meaning out of any color. Red is the color of heat, energy, danger, passion, that sort of thing. So when you add in the white to make it pink, it becomes a more friendly version of red, I guess you could say. It loses that feeling of danger and heat in exchange for a more soft passion and quiet energy, gaining an overall sweet connotation. Monochromatic color schemes are best for taking the meaning of a single color and just going as hard as possible to convey nothing but that. Meaning Sweetheart's design is practically the visual representation of a sickeningly sweet food that would probably send a small Victorian boy into a coma. And oh, would you look at that? She's literally a donut. Funny how vast my intelligence— oh shit! You probably didn't need me to tell you that, given that her name is literally Sweetheart, but that's why this is the first example. It's simple enough to ease you into when we eventually have to discuss this fucking thing. So in short, she's dressed in a monochromatic pink outfit as a means of emphasizing her one-note, sweet personality. She's not the only monochromatic character I have as an example or something. Nah, far from it. I've got so many. I've got like, let's see here. More than the max amount of people you need to kill before you get sent to prison, which I think is like 6.7 or something. Okay, so for each color scheme, we're gonna have our primary example like we just had with Sweetheart, but I've also got a secondary example that we can go through a bit faster, just as a means of reinforcing what I said for the primary one. Thing is though, this secondary list for monochromatic looks about as depressing as it is when the teacher tells a bunch of socially awkward students to get into groups in class. Regardless of how pathetic it may seem, let's just go through it real quick. The natural evolution of Sweetheart then is of course to talk about Fatalis. So if you had that on your bingo card, go ahead and just mark it off, okay? Alright, so I know how ridiculous of an example this might seem, but why limit ourselves to just human characters? I may have picked it out of desperation, but clearly Isaac Newton was desperate for some new material when he came up with the color wheel, and look where that got us. Fatalis, the final boss of sorts from the Monster Hunter franchise, very clearly fits the bill for a monochromatic design. Looking at its render and world specifically, its scales are very similar tones of this dark orange color, with a more pale and bright orange accenting its wings, horns, and frills. You might be wondering though, how in God's name am I gonna spin this to attach meaning to a dark orange color of this basic ass dragon? And to that I have to say, you almost just had the answer. Look how smart you are. It being just a basic dragon kind of is the meaning. Monster Hunter is a series chock full of all these crazy as hell looking creatures you face off with one after another, each having its own ridiculous yet surprisingly grounded features. Comparing it to another late game Elder Dragon, Valstrax, the literal rocket propelled dragon, you might start to see the point of Fatalis' design and color scheme. As I said, Fatalis is kind of treated like the final boss of the series, appearing in every generation, except for Gen 3 I think, not sure if Fatalis is in that one, gotta be honest. And kind of being implied to be the strongest monster in the lore with having some degree of intelligence, so the Monster Hunter team had to ask themselves, what the hell do we make to be the final boss of our little funny PS2 game with all the normal monsters that are already so fantastical? It's not like they could just top the raw creativity and sheer ingenuity of Bullfango. What are you, insane? So they created Fatalis, the most pure image of the classic European dragon they possibly could. The most well-known fantasy creature that inspired countless other designs of so many other fantasy creatures throughout time. It may be just a dragon, but that's exactly what makes it so powerful. So its color reflects that perfectly, a simplistic color scheme for a simplistic dragon. I said monochromatic color schemes are good for taking one message and going all in on conveying that, and the message Fatalis sends is power. Okay, well, that's all fine and dandy, but when do we get to the chromatic symbolism of Wario? Yeah, as much as I'm sure you're dying to see even more color schemes that consist of a single color, we gotta move on to the big scary world of multiple different colors, okay? We've now graduated from using one slice on the color wheel to 2 slices that are adjacent. Hell, maybe even 3 if you behave. That's right, it's time to talk about the analogous color scheme, aka monochromatic, but it's feeling just a bit spicy tonight. An analogous color scheme is one that uses colors adjacent to one another on a wheel, minimum 2, maximum 5 I'd say. Out of all the color schemes I'm talking about in this video, Analogous is probably the one I was able to find the most examples of, making it relatively common, although since it is kind of just like an expanded monochromatic, I'll probably go through this one a bit quicker. Whereas monochrome was laser focused on one color and the message it carries, Analogous expands its scope to still make it look focused while offering some more variety and freedom in terms of colors to use with the design. With the wealth of options available to me, I was wondering which one to choose as a primary example, until I remembered that thing I said earlier about how mixing trauma into an experience can make it stick in your head so much easier. So in that case, I'll be exploiting the collective trauma inflicted by Messmer the Impaler in Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree to teach you about some fucking red. Okay, so Mr. the Impaler here went through all the effort to find a blanket coat cape thing that's the exact same color as his flames. How fun is that? Making his colors primarily consist of red, red-orange, orange, yellow-orange, and yellow. So basically the entire warm side of the color wheel, which I doubt you need me to explain why that makes sense, but this is a freak-friendly YouTube channel, I might as well have the courtesy to ask. All his armor and his spear is also a nice silver color that works well to reflect the resplendent red hues of his flame. You might think at first it would have made more sense to make the metals gold to go with the warm colors and get something like Radon going, but I think Messmer realized how important it is to avoid all association with Radon due to something else in the DLC, but even that's not the kind of trauma I'm ready to tread on, okay? Also probably because that would have made the colors here much more one note than they already are. The silver takes on a red glow from the flame already, best not to overdo it with all the reds and oranges. Like I said though, in terms of meaning and common use of analogous colors, it's very much an extension of monochromatic. It takes one message and displays it as much as it possibly can, just a little bit more, in terms of variety. Except now, instead of red, it's like red and yellow. Never say there's slow progress in a Tusk video. We already covered what red means, so I guess I'll cover yellow, and orange can go fuck itself. Yellow, much like red, is a color of heat and energy, but with much more of a positive connotation. Instead of the threatening nature of red, it has a much more friendly and jubilant feel. The color of sunshine, I guess you could say. So naturally, incorporating the yellows to highlight the predominant red of his design fits perfectly. After all, his flames aren't just pure red. They also flicker with yellows and oranges. The colors he wears make him look like he is the embodiment of the flame itself. As for the meaning behind this color scheme, yeah, I gotta be honest, I know next to nothing about Shadow of the Erdtree lore. I know, shocker, considering the fact that... Oh, you think I look exactly like somebody who would know that kind of thing. Oh, okay, yeah, be straight with me. Are you only saying that because you looked through my phone and saw the opening line I text to every girl I talk to? When will somebody finally appreciate this line? So yeah, I can't definitively say what his colors are supposed to mean about his character, but this opens up another opportunity for me to guess based on that and nothing else. I'm sure I'm gonna get some stuff wrong here, but the frustration inflicted by my ceaseless ignorance is just part of the fun. The first thing that I wouldn't even need the colors to guess is that bro's got some serious mommy issues. I mean, which one of Marika's children doesn't? It's like her trademark at this point. As for some of my more out there guesses, I think he was sent here to wage war on the Hornsent people, and I'd guess that it's something that either Marika wants him to do, or he thinks doing it will help him regain her favor. Point is, I get the vibe he's committing these atrocities not because he wants to, but rather because he thinks he needs to. Also, what I was able to tell from just fighting him and how I've seen other people characterize him, it's that he seems relatively soft-spoken and elegant to a certain degree, or at least as elegant as you can be for somebody with the title The Impaler, but yeah, I digress. All in all, the colors he dons being reflective of the flame are thereby reflective of his mindset. That being that it's better for him to wholly immerse himself in both his flame and his conquest, so that way he doesn't have time to doubt himself. If he started doubting himself, then he'd start to second guess his mission, and he can't have that, even if he could escape the embrace of Messmer's flame. But you know who can escape the embrace of Messmer's flame? Only the best character from any video game, fucking Kim Kisturagi, that's who. Even though he may deserve it, I'm only gonna talk a little about Precinct 57's finest Kim from Disco Elysium. Now, to be specific, I guess I am cheating a little bit because I'm not necessarily talking about his whole design, rather just his portrait. Even if you've never played Disco Elysium, its art style and gorgeous character portraits are probably what you've been most likely to see. So if you're not a Disco Elysium enjoyer, it might seem a bit weird for me to be putting so much emphasis on the portrait over the whole model, but just know that the portraits hold deep meaning for the characters and are indicative of their personality as a whole. I mean, just look at Everart for Christ's sakes. You know exactly what this guy's like just by looking at the portrait, so long as you're able to identify it as a human in the first place and not some kind of mutant frog. As for the colors in Kim's portrait, we can see it very strictly adheres to an orange color palette with some red oranges and yellow oranges mixed in there. Honestly, it's so goddamn orange, I almost considered talking about this in the Monochromatic section, but I think it barely meets the threshold for being analogous in my mind at least. Now, Kim's portrait color seems a bit strange at first because, as we've established, the colors red and yellow are both active and lively, yet for some reason, this portrait doesn't feel like that at all. It feels dull, ordinary. With how much orange there is, you'd expect it to feel a lot more vibrant, so what gives? Well, I'm not entirely sure, but if I had to guess, I'd imagine it has something to do with this fucking ocean of dark red-orange behind him, but hey, what do I know? So, colors influence one another when they're used so close together. In this case, the orange is kind of darkened by the background. It's also partly because the brush strokes don't form a full base coat. You can see a bit of the background poking through the jacket. This, combined with his skin tone, his hair color, his jacket shadows, all work to kind of mute the orange, blending it in. Now, thankfully, unlike Messmer, I actually know plenty about Kim's character, given that I just finished my first playthrough of the game a couple months back and became the sorriest goddamn cop Revachol has ever seen. So I actually do have a good idea of what I interpret the colors to represent for his character. I could always be wrong though, so sorry if that's the case. I'm not sorry, I don't know why I wrote that. The way I see it, the orange analogous colors are supposed to highlight how he's quite the extraordinary person in the most ordinary and mundane of settings. Orange may be a color that stands out, but the dark red-orange surrounding him is far from that. He's meant to look like your average Revacholian, the kind of guy who once had big dreams for his future when he was a kid, only to be beaten down by the throes of life. His attitude towards you isn't unfriendly, but he's all business, at least at first, understandably wanting to focus on removing the dead body that's been hanging from the tree for a week. When you really get Kim to trust you though, it's like the background stops defining him, and the orange of his jacket in the white circle surrounding him starts to shine brighter than the dull behind him. He's meant to represent stability compared to Mr. Tequila Sunset himself, and the consistent focused nature of the color palette shows that beautifully. Even the most vibrant of colors can be stifled and subdued in such an oppressive environment, but through it all he's maintained his shine, even if he may not show it at first or even realize it himself, because he's meant to just look like an ordinary person. A beautiful contrast compared to the guy who yelled at a girl about an ice cop hat fuck show just because she said she didn't want to wear a hat. That's what I think at least, and the beautiful thing about art is that it can mean whatever the hell you want it to mean. Art can be either a window or a mirror, and great art is both. If the artist just spells everything out and just gives out all the answers as to what they meant their art to be symbolic of, then there's just no room for discussion. That's why subtlety is so important in art, because no matter what message you imbue your creation with, it's not going to please everyone. So that's why you have to keep it just vague enough so any viewer still has enough room to extract their own meaning that they think is right and means something to them. That's why whenever I'm discussing the meaning of artwork on a Friday night like any good upstanding very normal American citizen does, I always say things like what I got from this was, instead of what I think it's supposed to mean. I'm saying all this because I know at least one of you little gremlins out there is gonna hear my explanation of Kim's portrait and think I'm reading way too much into it and the artist just did it because they thought it would look good. And even if the artist did somehow think that and nothing else, then that doesn't mean it can't still hold meaning. Plus, it's Disco Elysium, man. The only game that I'm pretty sure has irreversibly converted some people to communism. If it can do that, then I'm pretty confident it can use the color orange. And I'll tell you what, Karl Marx, he definitely knew how to use some orange too, let me tell you. I knew the guy. You wouldn't believe the kind of orange he used, totally. As for the other characters who are good examples of analogous colors, I could talk about them, but you and I both know that if I have to go on another rant about the color yellow, then somebody's gonna end up in the hospital. Alright, moving on up to the big leagues. Now we get a color from one side and the other side of the color wheel at the same time. At this rate, I might finally be able to read this piece of paper I got sent in the mail the other day. I can only process one color at a time, so, who knows what it says. I'm not nervous, could be anything. it's probably my invitation to Smash Bros. The complementary color scheme. Probably the most common and easy to incorporate one of them all, to be fair. You got one main color but aren't sure what to make some of the other smaller elements? Just throw in the opposite one and they'll get along just fine. In fact, this information goes for many more things other than just color. Got a kid who doesn't want to eat their vegetables? Throw an angry moose in there. That'll motivate the little shit to eat their asparagus. You see, opposites attract and always work perfectly together. Every color has its complement, that being the one sitting directly across from it on the color wheel. It does exactly what it sounds like. What one color is missing, the other one makes up. Each one makes the other pop just that much better. Who would have guessed that light could be this entertaining? Now, the thing with a lot of characters who have complementary colors is that it's usually used as a supplement with another color scheme. Take Messmer, who we just talked about for an example. He's predominantly red analogous color scheme, but he does also make a little bit of use of complementary colors as well. That being with the eyes of his snake being green, which is the complement of red. So the primary examples I'm going to be using for this section are ones that use mostly the complementary colors, but they don't have to be exclusively those two colors for them to still qualify. Given that we've had such a focus on reds in the whole warm section of the color wheel with literally every character we've talked about so far, what better place to start than the complement of red? Green. This entire video so far, we've only talked about characters on the warm section, anywhere from red to yellow, which may have been just a tiny bit frustrating for some of you, I mean me at least. There's just so many possibilities on this damn wheel, and we've only been focusing on this part. If that thought has occurred to you, allow me to explain it like this. Going from analogous to complementary is like waiting at an intersection while driving. The light's been red for ages, it was yellow when you were pulling up, you just want it to be green, the song playing in your car is one you would normally skip but you're too focused on other things to change it, the AC is blasting but not through that one vent for some reason, there's some old food wrappers on the floor beneath you, Ganondorf is there, the car is still making that weird squeaking sound. Wait, what the fuck? Okay, so we now get to move on to red's other half, green. Our next contestant, the great king of evil Ganondorf, has politely volunteered as an example with his flame red hair and weirdly green skin. Now, one thing I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with by now, but I feel obliged to mention, is that red and blue are not opposites. They're commonly associated to be that way, and it does have some degree of truth with it, with their connotations being pretty opposite, but if you'll consult the graph please, you'll see that green is much more opposite. Even in terms of their meanings too, with green commonly being seen as the color of nature and life, then red being seen as the color of harm and destruction, like a verdant green forest blanketed in a roaring red inferno. That's what makes them complement one another. It's either that or just fucking Christmas marketing, so take your pick. Returning our attention back to Ganondorf before he starts playing his organ because he doesn't like to be ignored, we're specifically looking at his incarnation in Ocarina of Time. He has the green skin and red hair in most appearances, but I'd say this is his most well-known design with both the best renders and the funniest renders. Seriously, this original one of him standing up with that immaculate posture and that straight up nefarious grin cracks me up every time. Despite the sheer aura of this portrait, I'm going to be going mainly off his Smash Ultimate render because that's the cleanest and it includes his sick ass cape. Looking at it though, you may notice out of the total color usage in this design, very little of it is actually red, much less green. Well, that's going back to the little disclaimer I mentioned a bit ago, that being that there can be other colors that don't adhere to the primary color scheme. He still makes use of mostly complementary colors, just because there's brown doesn't suddenly invalidate the color scheme. That's part of the reason why I chose him to be precise. He's a good example of utilizing neutral colors. Neutral colors are kind of like Switzerland in World War II. They're relatively, well, neutral, meaning they can be used to fill a large amount of space between other more active colors. They're also not really sure how to feel about Nazis. I know what you are. All of these other colors making up his outfit are just kind of meant to fill space and get you to focus on what really matters, the green and red. The gold studding does kind of work along with the yellow trim of his cape to give more of a regal feeling, really putting the king in Great King of Evil. But other than that, all these other colors aren't meant to be the focus of our eyes. They're just giving room for the red and green to breathe. So that's what brings us to the actually important part, what complementary color schemes are good for. I've already kind of mentioned it, and it's the most obvious one of them all in terms of divining its meaning, but it still deserves to be reiterated. A complementary color scheme is best used to highlight the differences between two colors and in the process showcase a duality that empowers both of them. After all, what better way to create a harmonious color scheme than to combine two halves to create a greater whole? In Ganondorf's case, we see that analogy I made of a forest wildfire earlier given life. I'm not sure if he would take me comparing his existence to a wildfire as a compliment or an insult, but hey, we're just gonna run with it. His design also makes some good use of shape language that shows what I mean. His head is almost like the green leaves of a tree, with his hair being the fire that the tree is fueling. With all the effort he went through to comb his hair so immaculately and find the only barber in Hyrule that could make his eyebrows connect with his head hair, it makes it read like a burning fire. A fitting look for the great king of evil who wishes to take total control of the land and reduce all who oppose him to nothing but ash. The cape also helps to complement the image of a roaring inferno with how it flows in the wind and encircles his entire body. A flame that threatens to burn all life. That's what the colors of Ganondorf say. But of course, the star that burns brightest gets stabbed by Link with a Master Sword until it starts vomiting up blood, which is crazy to see on a damn N64 first-party Nintendo game. You get the point here though. The green complements the red like life complements death. Out of sheer curiosity, if you're wondering how much this whole interpretation changes between his Smash Ultimate redesign and his classic one, it doesn't change a whole lot. It looks sort of like they saw the concept with his original design in its more rough N64 state and just refined it to make it show more clearly. Most of the color changes were made with his clothes, with the original being a bit more saturated. So they just muted the colors a bit and replaced his weird ass dark turquoise green turtleneck mantle thing or whatever with just some more classy black shoulder pads. You can still see the burning fire analogy with this design, it's just a lot more subdued and hard to focus on when he has that absolutely insane hairline right in your face. Like, it's not just me who can't stop staring at that, right? That shit's insane, bro. He figured out how to put Vegeta to shame, and I didn't think that could be done at all. As for his Ganon form, the fire shape language is a lot more prevalent. It's a deeper green with his hair and torn cape prominently flowing like fire. Ever since I was a kid, I always thought it was a bit weird why they chose to make him green, since that's the same color as Link, and green is supposed to be the color of nature. Yes, this is the kind of thing I would be sitting in class thinking about instead of how to balance chemical equations. I was just cool like that. It's now that I kind of understand that choice, with Ganon's green being far more dark than Link's, and contrasting that with his burning red hair. Link also has warm colored hair though, being blonde and all. It's in that similarity where they differ though. Whereas Ganon's dark green is contrasted with a burning red, Link's light green is contrasted with a sunshine yellow. Both designs evoke the feeling of a forest. It's just that Link is a blooming verdant forest and Ganon is a raging crimson wildfire. Okay, now that I've done a super well-known character, I get to balance the scales and write about a far more niche character from an already niche game, right? Well, okay, I say niche, but I'm pretty sure there's nothing more ubiquitous among all animals than experiencing fear and hunger. Well, okay, I'm not just going to be talking about the games themselves, because that would be both quite off-topic, and I believe it would get my very real teacher's license revoked. So we're just going to be looking at the colors of the much more safe for kids character, Pocketcat. Now, I chose this character for two reasons. The first being that it's a good example of a complementary color scheme, using both violet and yellow. That one's obvious. And second, I don't remember, but it probably justifies this. Now, just to clarify for any of my fellow Funger enjoyers in the audience, I'm going to be looking primarily at his usual incarnation as seen in Termina, but I might also take a look at his successor briefly as well. That's right, when he changed pants and nothing more, I promise, this makes a difference. So, taking a quick look at him, we can of course see the predominant violet that makes up the bulk of his design. As for Violet's complement yellow, there's not much of it, but what is yellow holds more weight than anything else. His eyes shine a bright yellow, taking center stage on his design. I'm not exaggerating when I say that his eyes hold the most weight on his entire design. That's part of the reason why I chose him. Oh yeah, that was the other reason I forgot about earlier. Which, I mean, yeah, don't those brilliant amber pearls wholly justify talking about this universe's version of the boogeyman but on crack? Sure, he may be an agent of the moon god, and his whole purpose in doing that is to kidnap and probably eat children who show promising levels of divine potential, but is he really such a bad guy when he's just got that nice funny cat mask and a charming personality? A truly tough question, I know, but hey, that's why I always make sure to keep famous quotes and proverbs written down on this handy piece of paper in case I ever need to refer to them for situations like this. Oh shit. After all, in the wise words of Mahatma Gandhi, let me just get this open here. By order of the United States court system, you are required to immediately cease all educational related activities and relinquish any and all materials related to ongoing missing persons cases and report to the nearest... Why the hell would Gandhi say that to me? His eyes may be the only notably yellow thing in his design, but the presence is still really strong in it. No, I haven't forgotten about the yellow buttons and beige pants, it's just that they don't have quite the same aura as those eyes. His overworld sprite might show it off a bit better with them being more prominent, but the point is, I'm focusing on this as a means of showing how a little can go a long way for a design. When making a character that incorporates complementary colors, you don't have to go full half and half with it. Not all visual space is created equal. The eyes usually have a much higher value than the rest of the design, given that they're usually what you're going to be looking at the most. The eyes are the windows to the soul after all, and Pocketcat's soul says that you should run the fuck away. Yeah, so I'm sure you don't need me to tell you this, but his design is meant to be threatening and creepy as all hell, like the both figurative and literal predator that he is. But what exactly do the colors do to serve that message? You can figure out that you don't want to get within a 50-foot radius of this guy just by his mask and mannerisms alone. You don't need the color purple to know that you should be afraid. Well, like any good modern-day American middle-class worker, Pocketcat dresses for success in his job. When your job is kidnapping children who disobey their parents to give them to the moon god Rare, dressing in a dark purple is the ideal way to go about it. And no, I'm not speaking from experience for once. After all, just look at how ready and willing you are to learn. His colors are meant to give you the image of being alone in a dark forest when you hear a rustling in the bushes behind you, only to see a sickeningly shiny pair of resplendent yellow cat eyes staring down at you from the darkness, several feet above you. The shade of violet almost works as a camouflage for a dark night, and his yellow eyes, a trademark to let you know that you've been found. It also helps that violet is a color of royalty, with its dignified deep hue that lets you know you're in the presence of someone important. Its complement yellow is one we've already discussed, but when paired with violet, it works to bring some more energy to the relaxed purple, but not so much that it loses what makes it special. Violet already evokes a royal feeling, but when paired with yellow, it amplifies that by several magnitudes, which makes it fitting for a character like Pocketcat, who's not necessarily royalty, but he is an agent of an old god, Rare. I'm sure you can imagine, but that's not exactly something you see every day. He is a very special entity, even if he never stops yapping at the smallest answer you give him. And I swear, if you make even a single comment about me being, oh, just like that for real, as you kids say, then you are immediately being put on house arrest until a suitable jury can be assembled. Which I think is something that Gandhi also mentioned in his quote here. Hold on. We now only have 3 other color schemes to talk about. Contrary to what it might sound like though, we're well over halfway to the end because there is quite the fall off in terms of how many characters I could find for each. But there is not a fall off in terms of how much I can talk. This is a threat. But worry not, my star student. I won't let it affect the quality of education you'll be getting from me about the good old split complementary color scheme. What could such a combination entail, you might ask? Well, you'll never guess. You take the complementary color scheme, and instead of the direct opposite, you take the 2 colors adjacent to that one and get 3 lovely colors. Didn't I do such a good job of explaining that? Come on, I just got threatened by the ghost of Gandhi. Could I kill you to at least play along and humor me a little bit? Oh, okay, well, I'm glad I did, because I don't think we're going to be spending as long on these from here on out, so it's good that you understand. As for the bad news, the characters from here on out generally have colors that are much harder to find meaning behind. All this to say that, yeah, I don't really have much to say about Wario after all. I know, boo me all you want. I deserve it for leading you on like that. This is all that I deserve. Definitely nothing more severe, I promise. Alright, I guess I can find a bit more to say about him after all. Now I feel just a bit more obligated to talk about his design and colors, at least a little bit. Huh. I always figured that the physical manifestation of the sin that is greed would have a mustache with exactly 20 vertices. Go figure. Okay, so in terms of showcasing a split complementary color scheme, yeah, Wario's perfect. But hey, that's not something you need me to tell you. We all know that instinctually. Wario is very similar to Pocketcat, who we just saw last, to be honest. You ever say a sentence and immediately realize that you're probably the first person who's ever said that on planet Earth? Regardless, he makes good use of the dynamic between violet and yellow, but it's altered a bit to fit a more split complementary color scheme. That violet has been shifted over to a red-violet, something that would usually also make you shift the yellow to a more yellow-green for the colors to remain harmonious. Wario, as always, maintains the harmony of the world by simply choosing to put on green shoes. This kind of works to balance out the use of yellow and create a split complementary color scheme. We all knew you had it in you, Wario. Good job. To be honest though, I think that's kind of all I got for him. Not much else to say, really. Yeah, I gotta be honest, I can't exactly divine a whole lot in terms of the symbolism of these colors that represent Wario's character. I mean, there's probably some surface level stuff I could mention, like how the yellow of his clothes could be meant to invoke the feelings of gold and wealth, something the dude's just a bit interested in. There's other observations that I could make, but he's different from the other characters so far in that the real purpose behind his color scheme is not encapsulated to solely him. Rather, his signature color of yellow is in service of a greater color scheme. I could elaborate more on that statement, but where's the drama in that? What exactly are Wario's colors in service of? To be continued in a later section not even that far from now, because that's exactly what you want your professor to say about important information you need to pass the class. Now, like I said, there's far less characters to choose from this point on, and there are also ones that I have generally less to say about, but I'd be remiss to end the split complementary section this early with how nice of a color scheme it can be. So I'm just gonna give a quick shout out to my boy Spamton Neo here. He's fighting the good fight for the most part. Admittedly, he's not a perfect fit. It's a small stretch for him to fit into split complementary, but not by much. We're still unable to escape the yellows and violets, but in Wario's case, the pure color was red-violet. Spamton Neo's pure color is yellow, which then splits into its usual complement into red-violet and blue-violet. I know, right? Huge difference if the screws loose in your head are the same as mine. Basically, instead of the green, we got blue-violet now, giving him a mostly violet-dominant feeling. This is then accented by both the color yellow and the angular nature of his design to make him feel a bit more high energy, dangerous, so to say. Does this really have much to do with the character other than that, or is that pretty much it? I mean, they're all pretty bright and flashy colors, so I guess you could say that they're meant to indicate his job as an Addison, which requires him to be more attention-grabbing as well as showing his unstable nature. That's the best I got. There's probably some more you could dig out there, but I'm pretty sure the primary purpose of the colors is to evoke the vibe of a corrupted ad bot. Spamton is quite the complex beast, but if I were to do a full deep dive, God knows where we'd end up with how I can't stop myself from rambling, so I'll do the unthinkable and stop myself from rambling. What do these two characters that I'm pretty sure I'm the only person who has ever compared show us about the split complementary color scheme as a whole then? Well, remember how I introduced Analogous after talking about complementary? Yeah, this is pretty much that all over again. You'll never guess what I'm gonna say for Triad and Tetrad. Like all things in life, it's either a horse or a camel. Those two are no exceptions. What? You can kind of think of split complementary as just normal complementary, but with a bit more freedom if you're working with a design that works better with 3 main colors instead of just 2. I guess if you want to look at it in a more symbolic sense, it can create a stronger sense of contrasted unity with the 2 nearly analogous colors both working to enhance the running theme of a single color that works well with both. As you saw though, I couldn't exactly find the strongest examples to show the through thread that the color scheme creates. If there's anybody who happens to share my debilitating mental illness of being an art student, let me know some other good examples. I'd love to hear them. Despite the lackluster spread of examples though, I can assure you my dear student, it's a very good color scheme. I know this might seem like a bit too much to take in all at once with all these different variations of the color schemes, I know, but for what it's worth, I think you're doing an amazing job remembering all this. Oh, you're way better than my other students. When I tried to teach them this same topic the other day, I went through the whole lecture and they were completely silent the entire time until the very end when I asked, are there any questions left? And they both raised their hands in unison and said, oh, if you love colors so much, so why don't you marry them, old man? And I wasn't having it. I gave them such a cool comeback to shut them both down because, I'm just the cool teacher like that. They then proceeded to beat me with lead pipes and shatter my spine in 17 places. All right, we're in the home stretch now, students. We've just got Triad and Tetrad to go though, and at the rate we're going, we might even be done before the security guards get here to investigate all the screaming. So let's maintain our momentum here and roll right into the Triadic color scheme. Unfortunately for us though, just like the triangle the scheme is modeled after, we don't roll very well and our momentum is very short-lived. Definitely for that reason, and not just because my students have shattered my spine in 17 places, but I'll tough it out for my one good student. The Triad color scheme is exactly what it sounds like. Just 3 equidistant points on the color wheel. This is what your absolute classics like red, blue, and yellow are made out of. And just like those colors, the Triad excels in spread while being just focused enough to keep a design from feeling cluttered. If you thought the way I just described it sounded like the in-game description of a weapon, I figured if I'm using video game characters to explain these color schemes, I might as well talk about them like they're weapons in a game too, okay? Triadic does also have a 10% chance to proc bleeding on hit. Does that make it sound more exciting? You know who else has a 10% chance to proc bleeding on hit? Raphael, that's who, because he's the next example I'm talking about. Also, before any other Bulgur enjoyers rush to pointing out that Raphael can't actually inflict bleeding, have you considered whether or not he's holding a tri-tip dagger? I know, a big reference day for people who have my specific taste in video games and nothing else. Raphael from Baldur's Gate 3 is an interesting one, because aside from Messmer, he's the only example so far I could find from a game with realistic graphics, making him look just like a normal person you could kinda imagine seeing in real life. I say aside from Messmer because I mean, just look at the way bro is built. It looks like he heard the phrase, your body is a temple, and decided to model his body after the damn fire temple in Ocarina of Time with how needlessly convoluted and misshapen it is. And even then, Raphael isn't exactly a normal person either, because he's literally a devil. Don't you just hate when that happens? Might as well take advantage of the whole surprise Satan situation and just talk about that form mostly, because the red skin adds quite a lot to the color scheme. Just to get a quick baseline before that though, let's take a glance at the human form that puts more emphasis on his clothes. He wears a fancy suit, button-up, vest, shirt thing, whatever the hell you'd call it. It gives him a more distinguished and eloquent air about him, unlike my attempt to describe his appearance just now. The main body of his clothes consists of a dark blue, almost blue-violet tone, with highlights of a golden yellow extending all throughout his clothes and crimson red sleeves. It's a classic red, blue, and yellow color scheme, although where those primary colors would usually make a design feel playful or almost child-friendly, Raphael very much differs. Well, those two adjectives don't entirely fail to describe him because he does act almost playful and is pretty friendly to a tiefling child, but playful less in the happy fun sense and more in the predator playing with its food before killing it kind of way. Sure, he's also friendly towards that child, but not in a creepy way or anything. God no, just in an I want to steal your soul kind of way. That's much better. Remember kids, it's not murder if you just steal their soul. To quote the late Sir Richard Nixon, "Now that I have absorbed the 7 human souls, no monster, human, nor god can stop me." I think we all remember when he did that, right? Actually, that might have been Bill Clinton, now that I think about it. So why do the colors of his clothes elicit those feelings of playfulness associated with the primary colors, but in a darker, almost corrupted way? Well, the answer's in the question. It's just because it's darker. This is all part of a bigger point I'm working towards at the end that I want to be one of your main takeaways regarding color theory, but you just get another sneak peek at it for now. The value of colors drastically change the tone, and if you'll remember, value is sort of like the brightness of a color. It's not just the vibrant, pure hues of the primary triangle. It's a deep crimson red, a resplendent gold, and an umbral blue, like a shining golden goblet full of blood in a dark and twisted forest. You'll notice though that the color with the least presence in his clothes is red, which is strange for a devil. You know, the color associated with hell and devils is red, and yet it's relatively subdued in his clothes. Of course, if you've played the game, you'll understand exactly why that's the case. He doesn't just outwardly present himself as the goddamn devil to everyone. That's not exactly a good practice for attracting new clients. He presents himself to his potential patrons as just a normal friendly guy who wants to help out. Then, once they're out of all the other options and he thinks they have no choice but to take him up on his offer, he lays it all out on the table. In his devil form, he gets that beautiful red skin that I'm sure makes all the other devils jealous. He's probably the Avernus equivalent of all those supermodels on social media that make all the normal people compare themselves to and naturally feel inadequate. It's okay, Imp. You're average, and that's all you need to be. Just love yourself. Because there's no way anyone else is gonna love you after seeing just how good looking Raphael is. That I can't change, little imp. His 4-hour minimum skincare routine aside, that red skin in addition of wings is what tips the scales heavily in favor of red. Whereas before, the red on his sleeves served to enhance the blue and yellow, now the blue and yellow are dominated by red, serving merely as a break to not overstimulate the eyes. There aren't any new colors introduced in his devil form. All it does is shift the balance towards red, and you get this completely new vibe. Of course, there are other factors influencing how much more sinister he looks in this devil form, like those, big ass horns and spiky wings with his more eccentric body language and very orange fire lighting throughout the House of Hope where we see him most in this form. Those are just a few of those factors. The use of the color red throughout both designs though is what I find to be the most interesting. Wouldn't you know, I had much more to say about Raphael than I thought. Who would have guessed that talking about a devil with great symbolic and literal use of the color red would actually be interesting? That's kinda all I got for Triadic though, to be honest. I'm sure there's plenty of other characters who would be great examples, but I don't think having a bunch of different ones to look at is super necessary at this point, because it's just harder to find characters with triad and tetrad color schemes, and also because you've been such a good student that I'm sure you don't need me to explain every little thing to you at this point. And to be honest, Raphael technically isn't a perfect triad. The blue of his clothes is just a bit closer to blue-violet, which would throw it off a little bit, but it's close enough to where I'm sure if you asked some random person on the street what color it was, they'd probably say blue. Not everyone is as pretentious as me and would say dark blue-violet. Most people would want to avoid getting shoved in a locker after all. I say we rush right on to the final one then, and get to business with the tetradic color scheme. By far the least common, I'd say, and that's not because it's bad by any means, it's just a bit tough to find a design that really works well with it. Funny enough, I'm pretty sure somebody said something similar to me about my face once. I think I repressed that memory. If you'll remember, I teased that Wario's color scheme was actually in service of a larger one, which we're now getting to see. What a satisfying payoff to such a long-standing cliffhanger, I know. When you put each of the Mario brothers on the color wheel, you'll see that their their primary colors will form a tetrad. As I'm sure you've already figured out, Star Student, a tetradic color scheme is one that features 4 colors to form either a square or a rectangle on the wheel. It's essentially 2 separate complementary color pairs brought together. This is exactly what can make the color scheme either so effective when used right, or a cluttered mess when used wrong. As we've seen with pretty much all the characters so far, they usually have just 1 or 2 main colors that you think of when that character comes to mind. Even if they might use more than those colors, you probably still just associate them with just that 1 or 2. And if they do use more than 3 colors, there's usually the main ones, with all the rest being just neutral browns or grays. It's exactly because of that this tetrad becomes hard to use well. Having 4 distinctly separate hues all on one character can make it look like rainbow vomit if not used well. That's why the example I'm going to be using for tetrad is different from all the rest. I want to give examples that showcase the color scheme's strength, and I think the biggest strength of the tetrad is how it can be used across multiple characters.
That's right, folks, you're getting 4 for the price of 1. It's such a bargain you can't even hope to resist the sheer oppressive force of raw fucking deals! Your decrepit old ears heard that right. Call now and forfeit your meager soul to me, and you'll get access to this mini version of me! So be careful.
Now, where were we? Yes, that I'll be using a group of 4 characters as the example for tetrad. Now, there are 2 examples I actually want to talk about for tetrad. One that actually fits the color scheme completely, and one that's a bit off, but I still want to talk about. The one that actually fits isn't a brand new example though. Like I said, it's the long-awaited continuation of the Wario saga. All 4 of these questionable Italians make up a tetrad together. Mario and Luigi are red and green, complements of one another. Wario and Waluigi are yellow and violet, also complements of one another. When you put it all together in the color wheel, you can finally see Wario's endgame. Each one is a point to make up the scheme, otherwise known as just a goddamn rectangle. Red and yellow make up one pair, and green and violet make up the other. To make an analogy that totally everyone will get, it's like how Metang evolves into Metagross. A Metang is already 2 Beldums put together, so you put 2 Metangs together and you get a Metagross. A tetrad is just 2 complementary color schemes put together to create an all-rounder color scheme. It's as simple as that. And of course, I'm sure you all know I don't exactly have to mention this, they're the Mario Bros for fuck's sake. Obviously, Wario and Waluigi are supposed to be the evil versions of Mario and Luigi, so it makes sense that they'd be the opposite color and form that tetrad. Like I said, imagining all 4 of these colors on just one character, that would kind of be a mess. So that's why, like I said, I think the tetrad color scheme is better for just groups of characters or some long-running color scheme between multiple different things, as we can see here. Well, that's all fine and good, but what about the other set of characters I mentioned? The pendulum of character popularity swung far in the direction of well-known with Raphael and Mario, therefore it now must swing far in the obscure direction, with the main cast of one of my favorite indie games, Hylics. I'm sure just mentioning that made some of you super excited to hear the game be mentioned, and a much larger portion of you confused about why the hell this game looks like the visual representation of everything and nothing all at once. That's not exactly what we're here to talk about though. Even though I could yap about this game for hours, I'd highly recommend it if you like turn-based RPGs. To clarify for any other Hylics weirdos, I'm going to be talking about the Hylics 2 versions of their designs, as they're a lot more fleshed out and interesting to dissect. Hylics 1 is great too, but the sequel has significantly more substance for me to work with in this context, and just in general. Our protagonist Wayne and his 3 friends Samsnosa, Dedusmoln, and Pangorma make up a perfect 4-piece team, which can be seen clear as day in their designs. Now, I say clear as day, yet if you're not familiar with Hylics, I know you're going to be looking at these gormless freaks and wondering if any of them are even human, much less what they are if they're not. Well, that's the beauty of the game. In my opinion, I think Hylics 2 is the game with the most beautiful graphics I've ever seen. However, it's an art style that is absolutely not for everyone, and some of you are going to be looking at this and think it's a strain on the eyes. I can understand that. I'm not going to trust you ever again, but I'll at least pretend I understand you. Point is, the art style of the game makes this an interesting case because it's allowed to do more crazy things with the colors since it's not constrained to a realistic style. How exactly does that apply to the classic RPG party of 4 then? Well, you've got the champion of ennui, Wayne, who's a resplendent yellow, the paper cup archaeologist Dedusmoln, who's a verdant green, the dread knight of Ythorn Pangorma, who's a blazing red, and the wandering warrior Samsnosa, who's a royal blue? Not violet, she's just blue? Oh, well, that kind of throws things off, huh? Okay, so here's the thing, right? If you've been paying attention, you've probably noticed how I've made a lot of stretches for certain colors so they fit the scheme, usually making the argument that it's one more to the left or right so it all fits nicely. And that hasn't been an accident. In fact, some of them I only picked because they were slightly off. Case in point, these 4 are so close to being a tetrad, and it's not like I can argue that Samsnosa is actually violet, that's inarguably blue. So then, why even bother bringing this up if it's not applicable? Well, if you couldn't tell, that's why I prefaced this this example with the Mario Brothers, since they actually fit the tetradic color scheme. I've already given you one proper example, now we get to bend things a little. Saying it like that though, you might think that Samsnosa being blue ruins the color synergy, no? Well, look at them all together, and you tell me if you don't think their colors synergize well. I've taught you plenty about colors so far, so you should know enough to figure it out, right? Don't just listen to the opinions of some random dude on the internet and take it as gospel. Formulate your own opinion. Do these four colors work well together? Regardless of your answer, you knew enough to make an informed take, didn't you? Well, of course you did, because you don't need any education to tell if certain colors look pretty together. If I had asked you this exact question at the very beginning, your opinion would be worth just as much then as it is now. If you ask me, I'd say no, the blue doesn't ruin the whole color scheme. Blue is quite close to violet, and if you want to think about it this way, the red of her poncho mixes with the blue to create more of a violet. It doesn't literally mix, but it kind of fills that role. Either way, the blue works to fill the role of a cool color that works well with Dedusmold's green to balance out the vibrancy of Wayne and Pangorma. Sure, it may not be a perfect fit according to this little plastic wheel, but it's a pretty good fit according to my eyes. The colors work together to show that when they're all with one another, they're a well-rounded team that can do anything. And that's not even mentioning how much I love their individual designs. All apart from Wayne, they have a strong color making up their clothes that complements their skin color. I don't know if Pangorma's helmet is his skin, but whatever. Wayne's a bit of a special case who's supposed to seem like a template for more to be built onto, so it makes sense for his suit to not be violet. The pink armor for Dedusmold's green, the red poncho for Samsnosa's blue, and the blue static electricity fur for Pangorma's red. It all synergizes perfectly. But wait a second, the complement for blue is green, not red. Shouldn't Pangorma and Samsnosa also be off then? Well, once again, you look at these and you tell me whether or not you think the red goes well with blue. I mean, I ask that, but it's red and blue for God's sake. The colors that are literally associated with being opposites. So why is it then that they're not across from one another on the color wheel? Why do the colors of these four work so well when the almighty wheel deems them not harmonic? Well, I'd be happy to explain. It's that color theory is kinda bullshit. I know, quite the bold statement after spending the entire video talking about nothing but all the cool things you can do with color theory, but hear me out. When I said that, I emphasized the word kinda, and I want to stress that again. The color wheel is a really neat little tool. There's a reason why I always keep one next to me on my desk. Not only does it make me seem really cool, guys, I promise, but also because it is just a very helpful tool. It's one of the very few things that can bring a shred of certainty and rules to the otherwise lawless wasteland that is art. If I need help picking out a color to go with what I've already got in mind, or brainstorm some other color schemes for my designs, it's always there for me as a reliable tool. So if that's all true, then why do I like the colors of the Hylics characters so much? They don't perfectly fit with what the rules of the wheel says. Samsnosa should be violet, the blue suit of Pangorma should be green, and so on. Well, that's exactly the thing with rules in art. They're there to help you get your footing, to help you learn the ropes, give you instructions to follow, and impart some base level knowledge to help you get started. Once you're beyond that point though, with some good experience and a strong confidence in your ability, those rules that started out as a rope you desperately cling onto tightens around your wrist into a binding knot. Rules are meant to be broken. It's as simple as that. If these four precisely followed the rules laid out by the wheel, then I don't think I'd like them as much. It wouldn't make too much of a difference, but it'd still be noticeable. And they would still look good if they did follow the rules, but the thing is, these designs are the pure creations from the head of their creator, Mason Lindroth. The land of Hylics isn't a place of rules and order. It's a place of feeling, a place of subjectivity. That's kind of why I also used other examples throughout the video that didn't perfectly fit their respective color schemes. I wanted to plant a small seed of doubt in the color wheel by showing all these examples that looked good despite breaking the rules just a tiny bit. Whether or not planting that seed worked or it just made me look like I don't know what I'm talking about, that's up for you to decide. Point is, the best artworks are often the ones that break rules. Like I just said, that doesn't make these rules worthless, they have a place. It's just that your opinion as an artist is more valuable than some dumb wheel. Well, that's all I've got for today's lecture. Sorry your first day here had to be so weird. Things will be way more chaotic next class, I promise. In all seriousness, I know this was a bit of a weird day for you, and there was a lot of odd things that happened, and I hope you weren't put off by it. You've been just so patient through all this, so I really would like to see you back for another day of class. Yeah, it was a bit weird, it was just the two of us today, but like I said, I do have two other students here who, for as weird as they are, I do think you'll get along with them, so hopefully they'll be here next time if you actually do choose to come back here. You don't have to give me your answer right now, but just consider it. Alright, thank you for actually taking the time to listen to me ramble. It really means a lot to me. See you next time.